What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer, and with Blizzcon 2018 less than a month away, we're rapidly closing in on the reveal of Overwatch Hero 29. So far, things have been mostly quiet regarding the next Overwatch hero, but there are a few leads we have to go on when it comes to determining who this next hero will be and what role they'll play in the game. So today, I'm going to delve into the details to determine what exactly we can expect from Hero 29. If you're new to my channel and end up enjoying this video, then be sure to like, sub, and hit the bell to keep up with all my future Overwatch content. Now, when adding a new hero, the most important thing to consider is what the game needs in terms of balance and diversity. If there are any glaring holes in the roster when it comes to countering a strong hero or composition, that's a good place to start looking. However, in all honesty, the game's actually in a pretty balanced state currently, from a relative standpoint at least. But if there is one thing that most frequently pops up as a problem, that would be the overabundance of crowd control. Since the game's launch, every single hero added except Moira has had some form of CC. While it's much more prominent and annoying in certain heroes over others, it's still safe to say that Overwatch has become a much different environment over the past 2.5 years. The introduction of so many CC heroes has had its benefits, but also its downsides, perhaps the greatest of which is its impact on tanks. Tank heroes, whose goal is to stand their ground, cover their allies, and make space, have had a hard time doing that when they're constantly getting stunned, booped, hacked, slept, and stunned again. Main tanks in particular have been quite literally hit with the brunt of this crowd control abundance, and boy have they suffered. Even if they still fill a crucial role in nearly every team composition, playing against a CC heavy enemy team as a main tank can be really irritating. Outside of Orisa with her Fortify or having an ally Zarya, there's really not much the game's main tanks can do to oppose crowd control. In fact, Orisa and Zarya are literally the game's only two direct counters to CC. At the very least, having more heroes who can resist stuns and the like would help to diversify your options against CC heroes, and maybe even hard counter them in the same way Brigitte hard counters dive. A common suggestion on how to do this would simply be teammate CC nullification. The hero bestows an Orisa Fortify-like effect on allies, perhaps in an AoE similar to Lucio's auras, to protect them from getting stunned or displaced. While this sounds like a straightforward and effective solution, it unfortunately has its own problems. First of all, this ability would at the very least need to be an ultimate, and even then could be considered massively OP. Crowd control, as annoying as it is critical for countering high mobility heroes. Depending on what kind of mobility the anti-CC hero has, I could imagine them fitting into some fairly nightmarish comps. Pairing this with a nanoblading Genji could almost be a guaranteed team wipe, but while being OP in certain scenarios, it'd also be worthless in just as many. Even nowadays, you'll frequently encounter team comps with little to no crowd control, making this anti-CC hero's ult about 100% worthless in these situations. To compensate, it would need to have some other positive effect in addition to CC nullification, which again would just make it even more OP in the original situations. On top of all this, if you thought Brigitte was a brain-dead easy hero, giving someone else a no-skill anti-CC aura would be even worse when talking about low skill floors. While I think ally CC protection could be worked into a future hero, I'm not so sure it's quite the go-to solution many of us think it is. However, we could see crowd control nullification work in a different sort of way. What if Hero 29 were to have the anti-CC effects of Orisa's Fortify, but instead of being part of an ability or ultimate, it would be a permanently active passive. The hero would be 100% immune to crowd control at all times. Now, this may sound absurd at first, especially given how I just said CC nullification could be both OP and worthless depending on the situation, but if it's stuck to just the hero themselves and can't be shared onto allies, and is tied to merely their passive so as to not remove value from any of their activated abilities when facing a non-crowd control enemy, then I think it could actually work. The hero would 100% have to be a tank, and more than likely would function as a main tank. Like the other main tanks, they would face the enemy team head on, and even if they can't directly save their teammates from enemy CC, they may be able to do it indirectly. From the perspective of the enemy, having even just one opponent who's entirely resistant to stuns and the like could serve as a deterrent from picking a hero like Doomfist or Brigitte, especially if that one opponent is the main tank which you're going to want to focus down to get through to their backline. Instead, you might want to go with a Reaper or Junkrat who can focus more raw damage onto them. This anti-CC tank would need to have low mobility, as being able to run them in a dive comp could prove to be meta-definingly powerful. Because of this, they'd work better for slow pushing, which still opens them up to being countered, but gives you a solution to cut through a CC-heavy enemy team composition. And if even still the CC immunity proved to be too strong, there may be some way for the enemy to break it, such as being hacked or by taking enough damage in a set period of time. By doing this, there would be counters to work around it, but overall it'd be a massive deterrent for the enemy to use CC. Now, admittedly, this would just be a permanent or pseudo-permanent version of Orisa's Fortify, minus the damage reduction. Therefore, not only would it feel somewhat unoriginal, but also it would detract from Orisa's significance as a hero who can counter CC, as now there'd be another hero who counters it in the exact same way, but does it a hell of a lot better. However, I think the new hero overall could be different enough so as to make both still feel distinct and respectively useful. For example, Hero 29 probably won't have a barrier like Orisa and Reinhardt if they have this passive anti-CC. They need some kind of protective abilities, especially if they're expected to be used as a main tank, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier like the ones we already have in abundance. One alternative to a barrier would be a sort of smokescreen that blocks enemy visibility within an area, but allows your own team to still see. While this wouldn't provide any kind of physical protection for your allies, the smoke would make it more difficult for the enemy to actually hit them. Furthermore, there's a couple of different ways the smoke screen could work. Maybe when the enemy themselves are inside the smoke, it's less opaque, meaning that close range heroes like Doomfist or Tracer could still operate within it at only a slight disadvantage, but snipers and other long range heroes would be almost useless. Also, it'd likely be tied to an activated ability, meaning that you can't provide constant coverage with it, but it could have a high enough uptime to encourage the enemy to focus down the tank that's generating it. Another barrier alternative would be to build defensive structures. This could be like Mei's Ice Wall, but perhaps more complex and diverse in what kinds of shapes and sizes can be constructed. The hero may also be able to build temporary jump pads, thus giving their team access to high ground on either their own walls that they've built or the natural high ground on any given map. This wouldn't provide quite the same kind of cover as Orisa and Rein, since allies wouldn't be able to shoot through the structures, but it could still be advantageous depending on how and where it was used. Other possible defensive abilities could include functioning as a walking shield generator, giving your nearby teammates bonus shield health to make them more tanky. This would encourage the enemy to kill you first, as doing so would remove the shields from everyone else, or they may have some kind of bullet magnetism, which draws enemy projectiles and damage onto you instead of your allies. This one in particular I think would be a messy mechanic to try and implement, so I'm really not a big fan of it, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility of it being added in some form or another. Basically, Hero 29, regardless of whether they actually stand to counter CC, would need some way to draw aggro from the enemy in order to protect your teammates. While many of these ability ideas I mentioned could also work in off-tank kits, I think the game would be better off if the new hero was designed to better fit the role of a main tank. One last CC counter I want to suggest before moving on to some non-tank possibilities is the ability of permanent flight. Think Mercy during her ultimate, but instead it's a constantly active passive on a tank hero. Being airborne wouldn't protect you from all forms of CC, but it'd certainly help you to avoid getting rocket punched and shield bashed. I'm not sure a flying hero like this would make for a great main tank, but hey, it's just a suggestion. I actually did a full hero concept video specifically for the mecha pilot Overlord, and part of his proposed kit included permaflight and drones. So if you're interested in hearing how crazy abilities like this could actually be balanced to work in Overwatch, I recommend you check that video out through the card on screen. Anyways, while I still believe that Hero 29 will more than likely be another tank, the next most likely class would actually be damage. While lots of people want another support hero, and the class certainly could use some more representation to help balance out the roster, it's very safe to say that they won't be the next hero we get. Not only have 2 of the past 3 heroes already been supports, but the support class as a whole is actually really well balanced at the moment. Sure, Mercy could use a bit more tuning, but that's basically a constant at this point. The fact that we got balance changes for nearly every support only a couple months ago, and that they were done primarily to balance out the class as a whole, seems like the strongest indicator against Hero 29 being another support. Why would Blizzard go for a sweeping support balance update if they knew that another support would be added within just another few months, thus throwing these changes out of balance again? While we could absolutely use more supports in the long term, they're less important when it comes to what we need right now. I could see a support hero possibly being a secondary healer, whose abilities focus on countering crowd control, and maybe we'll get that one day in Hero 30 or 31. But for now, I think supports are off the table. Although this is Blizzard, so perhaps they'll hit us upside the head with yet another curveball. The only reason I suggest Hero 29 could be a damage hero over a support is mainly that it's been over a year now since we've gotten one. While there's already far more damage heroes than tanks and supports, I don't think that should be a deterrent from ever getting a new DPS, especially if Blizzard can find some way to make a new kind of damage hero. With DPS being the biggest category, this also gives it room to be the most diverse. There's a lot of room to add new DPS who can serve some of the same functions we're looking for in tanks and supports, in this case being a counter to crowd control. I wouldn't expect a damage hero to have clean-cut CC immunity like what we might find in a tank or support, but they could be designed in such a way to indirectly counter it. While we've already gotten this a bit with the Torbjorn rework, I think a new DPS designated as anti-CC could be really interesting. I'll admit, I have no idea what this would look like or how it would work, but I'm just thinking outside the box to find solutions. Overall, I feel pretty safe assuming Hero 29 will be a tank of some kind, but there are always other possibilities. And speaking of other possibilities, I would love to hear your ideas for Hero 29. What role do you think they'll fill, and what kind of abilities will be in their kit? This video is just the tip of the iceberg for my Hero 29 discussion, as I haven't even gotten into who exactly the next hero might be. There's a lot of characters lurking in Overwatch's shadows, so I'll be delving into possible candidates in a future video soon. If you don't want to miss out on that, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to not miss any of my upcoming Overwatch content. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, share it with a friend if you really liked it, and follow me on Twitter for even more news and updates. This is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, it's officially time to start getting hyped for Hero 29, so have a great day.